This is Sarah, and last week I made a bunch of progress on my Kakumaki, but I got stuck. So I've been thinking about what my next move is going to be. In the meantime, I'm going to catch you up on all the stuff that I did. I mentioned that I needed to figure out a way to attach a cowl in between the hood and the body of the garment. So I started looking up patterns on the internet for different ways to handle creating a cowl. And almost all of them were like long tube type shapes that were attached to the neckline that kind of bunched up around the throat. If you wanted to stretch it up over your head, it also doubled as a hood, which is perfect. That's exactly what I need. I actually happened to already have a hoodie in my closet that had such a cowl that was both cowl and hood. So I dragged that into the garage, laid it down on the ground, and traced it so that I could use its shape pretty much verbatim. I quickly made a test piece and attached it to my first mock-up, and I ended up having to close that seam in the front, like the opening that made it more cape-like, because since most of those cowls were donut shape, they went all the way around your head, it didn't make sense to have an opening there, because it would just sort of like come up to the neck and then stop. I don't know. Not a big deal. I'm not married to the idea of having an opening in front, so whatever. I sewed that shut on the mock-up, added the hood, tried it on, and saw that it more or less worked. So I thought I was there. I thought I had the pattern that I was going to use to make the Kakumaki. So I went to the fabric store to get the batting, that quilting material, that poofy stuff that goes inside of blankets and quilts. I was going to bring that home and actually start using the nice new yellow stuff that I bought and the quilt, the sacred quilt that I'm restoring. I mentioned it to my best friend who was stopping by to visit, and he luckily talked me out of it. He was like, no, now that you have the pattern that you think you're going to use and the quilting batting, take both of those components and make another mock-up just to test that every component of your design works. And really glad that he did this, because once I went through the motions of creating an entire second mock-up, I ran into some snags. Because of course I did. So I went into the garage sometime last week, recut out all of my pattern pieces modified to the length and the width that I thought I was going to use. I cut out the batting, I stitched them all together, I made my tube-like body shape without the seam in front. I created the cowl, I attached the cowl. The last thing I needed to do was add the ribbing, right? The horizontal lines that would make it look more quilt-like. Very much a design aesthetic thing that I decided to do. For the mock-up, to create these lines, I just kind of stuck some pins in as guides and followed them. Since I just eyeballed each one of those rings and I didn't measure the exact diameter, the top one, the one that's closest to my neck, was too small and it didn't fit over my shoulders. Which seems really obvious, but it's not something that you think about when you're just kind of winging it. So once I sewed the Kakumaki shut on the side seam, it no longer fit at all. I tried to put it on over my head and it just kind of like stopped. So I had this really weird like situation going into the cowl, and that was bad. There's a couple different ways to solve this. I could make the rings start lower on the body. I could adjust the pattern so that the pieces are thicker, so that the overall diameter of the circle that is the poncho is actually bigger and accounts for more, so that those circles have a larger diameter in general. There's a bunch of different things that I could do. I'm just not entirely sure which is appropriate. It also occurs to me that it's going into summer now here, and I live in Las Vegas, and it's going to be another like 5 to 6 months before it makes sense to even wear a blanket in any context. So I'm probably going to hold off for a little bit until I'm absolutely sure, because there's no rush. I got this really nice gold thread from the fabric store, and this is what I'm going to use to sew up all of those giant tears in the quilt portion of my Kakumaki, which is the sacred part. And I mentioned that I was inspired by the kintsugi practice, the Japanese practice of repairing precious pottery and plates, and they use like a golden adhesive to repair them, and as such I want to kind of mimic that aesthetic by grafting my quilt to the new fabric and sewing up those tears using this as a way to embellish each one of those rips in a way that highlights them and kind of pays homage to the life experience of the quilt. Until my next video, as always, thank you for watching. Keep making awesome stuff out there. Wear a mask on your face. Be nice to one another. I sound like someone's mom. Yeah, I'll see you next time.